podcast is brought to you by Hunt Ready. Hunt Ready makes quality upland vests, all sourced here in the US of A for all of our pursuits. Check out Hunt Ready and get after them. So tonight we have Dominic Bachman on out from Oregon. So we're excited to have him here. He's had a kennel since for Wirehair since the 1990s. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dad and I started in 1996.
Nice. And he is also a bird biologist. So super excited to have him on, talk about those Western birds that all of us love chasing. So Dom, could you give your go ahead and give yourself an introduction?
Sure. I've been involved in the bird and bird dog world my whole life. My dad was also a waterfowl bird biologist, and I went to school for it, went to more school for it, got a graduate degree in studying geese, actually. And then the whole time we've been involved in these German wirehairs, and I've been involved in NAVHDA and AKC hunt tests and field trials and all the things. And I think my real biggest passion has been just a diversity of bird hunting, waterfowl, upland birds, all the upland species, the rare species. And with my latest dream scheme over the last few years has been just an interest in going to places where I can get 4 or 6 species in one hunt. Like that's my dream stuff. That's what gets me excited.
Yeah. Where do you so there are a lot of people that I've been talking to say like Montana area is a super good area to find those multiple species of birds. I guess I've never been out there. Have you ever hunted in Montana?
Yeah, almost every year. My dad had a cabin in eastern Montana for a long time, and I usually start my season out there September 1st. This year we were out around that. It's my birthday is September 3rd, and I've always been lucky enough to have some pretty fun grouse hunts or upland hunts or youth waterfowl hunts on my birthday. And so it was pretty good. This year I had my best ever sort of multi hunt where in one sort of walk, it was really a couple of walks because we swapped out dogs, but from one parking area, we shot a limit of sage grouse, a limit of shark tails, and a limit of huns, which I'd never actually done before from one spot. So I was pretty stoked.
That is impressive. That is super impressive. Do you know I don't know what the limits are out there. Do you remember what they are per bird?
Yeah, you can shoot 8 huns and 2 sage grouse and 4 shark tails. So
wow, that's impressive. So let's talk about the bird biology for a minute. First off, what's the college like that you have to go through, and then what does your now day-to-day look like as a bird biologist?
Yeah, I'd like to say one quick thing, like a little caveat. So everything is my own opinion and not the opinion of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, not the opinion of the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association, the 2 organizations that I do a bunch with. This is just my own personal opinion on this podcast. So to be a wildlife biologist, bird biologist, generally you need an undergraduate degree in some sort of a natural resource type range field, and almost always a master's degree at a minimum, if not a PhD, in some sort of wildlife ecology sort of background sort of thing. And it was a really fun, like I enjoyed a lot of my college courses were things that, wildlife diseases and things that are just, I think the general layperson is super interested in wildlife management and habitat management and agricultural systems. And, knowing I took a lot of range classes, and there's not that many plants when you live out west in the arid environments. And so if you know 200 plants, you can look like a superhero expert botanist because there's only about 300, in the desert. And so it's really fun. I think it's fun knowing those things. And I really nerded out as a student. There was actually this thing called the Wildlife Quiz Bowl, which is kind of like this dorky Jeopardy type game with buzzers where random wildlife facts, like, how many bird species are there in the world, or what is the scientific name of a orca whale or whatever. And I got really into that when I was in undergrad, of just knowing every sort of nerdy fact that you can know. So, and the jobs could be a lot of things. Now the world has kind of changed with a lot of options with small nonprofits you can work for. I currently work for the federal government at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge as a wildlife biologist, mostly working on wetlands. But I have, in my career, I worked for the National Wild Turkey Federation as a turkey biologist. I worked for the High Desert Partnership, a very small organization, nonprofit, as a wetland biologist. And then I also worked for the federal government for 3 different refuges. I've been all over from Utah to Alaska, California, Oregon, Washington. I worked for the Natural Resource Conservation Service in Washington as their statewide biologist, and that organization is in charge of things like CRP that you probably talk about on a lot of your podcasts, like how they create these great grass areas that have improved bird habitat. And worked on this other WRP program, the Wetland Reserve Program in Washington, all kinds of cool wetlands and duck clubs and nonprofits that are protecting wetlands just for wildlife. So it's been kind of a fun, different sort of career. I've bounced around a fair amount because I like seeing different places.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been kind of all over. So now, with being based out in Oregon, working with wetland areas, what is your kind of, I don't know if you'd say day to day, or your what you guys strive for mainly?
Yeah, I have one massive project that I'm working on, which is the Malheur Lake system has gone from a functioning clear water wetland with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of ducks using it to an invasive species, the common carp, the same carp that you probably know in the West, has invaded and turned everything into a giant chocolate milk. So really, carp killing is my main part of my job, is figuring out these weaknesses with carp and how we can at least manipulate them. I don't truly believe that I can completely remove them from the system. They're really brilliant at what they do. And they have, anywhere from 2 to 5 million eggs inside of some of the females we put in. They're pretty hard creature to beat, but we're doing some really fun stuff using these underwater electric fences. I have these radio telemetry units on a bunch of carp right now. We're tracking them. We've tried commercial fisheries. We've got a whole bunch of these pretty cool traps that are set up for them, and just kind of I study their movements and try to figure them out. And right now we're in an unbelievable mega drought, and so a lot of them are dying on their own, and the lake is drying up. And so last year we had to dig through 10,000 dead carp to go get our little telemetry units back to next year in a giant, massive low spot in the lake that dried up. So some pretty neat stuff. And we've used some chemicals, this thing called rotenone, which kills fish. And we got to rotenone an area and remove fish from a pretty cool fisheries near where I live, off the refuge, to try to reduce the number of places that carp can come from. So,
man, that's crazy. How long, if you recall, did it take for the carp to basically evade it to where it became a nice clear water, or where it was a nice clear water to where it became muddy? Is it a pretty quick process for them to overtake?
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. That's a great question. So the carp really were brought in, I believe, by railroad workers for food. As the railroad was coming through, some people put carp in the river system, in the Silvies River system, in order to go back and catch them later for food. So really is well established by like 1950s, and the system was still pretty functional through 50s and 60s. And the refuge managers, this refuge is old, put in by Teddy Roosevelt, so in the early 1900s, it's created. But they were battling carp. They still had clear water. They still had some carp. And what happens when you don't have clear water, you probably know this, but is if, this is from like basic science, is that if sunlight can't get there, a plant can't grow. And all of these things, for example, sago pondweed is a really important pondweed to waterfowl. Everything likes to eat it. Diving ducks, puddle ducks, grazing ducks. And so if there's no sunlight can get to the bottom, none of that can grow. And so in this case, it was still clear water. The refuge was doing these row mountain treatments in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and having some pretty decent control over them. And you would get a couple years where you would get a big bounce back and duck numbers would go way back up. But then this kind of crazy, I don't even know, 1,000-year event happened in the 1980s. And I was lucky enough to kind of be part of this. My dad was, like I said, a wildlife management guy, and I lived on the Great Salt Lake in Utah. And what happened in 82, 83, 83, 84, and 85, 86 was this mega flood, like high water 3 years in a row. The Great Salt Lake came way up. The house I was living in, which was the Ogden Bay waterfowl management area, had like a little levee around it to protect it from the salt water coming up. And we're a similar system here. We're the end of a closed basin, and there's one more basin beyond Malheur that is actually a saline lake or hyposaline lake, but Malheur is still a freshwater system, but it's at the end of the system. So it jumped from like something like an average of 40,000 acres to well over 100,000 acres. And what happened is the deepest part of it, all the vegetation like the bulrush, the cattail, the tules, as they call them out west, all were overtopped by the water. And so it killed them. And then the carp really were able to take over, as well as a couple other things. It really lets this thing called wind fetch. So as the wind is moving back and forth, it really stirs up the mud that the carp have already stirred up. And ice is allowed to move around. If you think of this goal of many wetlands is kind of what's called a hemi-marsh. So as you're walking out there, there's a patch of tules, and then there's open water, and then there's a patch of tules. That's how this was. And now there's nothing in the middle. And without that hemi-marsh, these big chunks of ice go back and forth, and it really cuts out anything that tries to grow out there, emergent vegetation. And so the long answer is it took a while and a bunch of different events to turn this lake into something that is really not many birds use it. Now, when the water's really low and it's this little mud flat, like right now, there's probably 60,000, 150,000 snow and roskies sitting out there, and quite a few. But there isn't great food resources for a lot of the waterfowl out there. The carp are eating one thing. They're basically eating these little teeny tiny larvae of a midge, which is basically like a mosquito that doesn't bite. And these little worms live in the mud, and that is what the carp are actually living off of.
Interesting. Huh. I would have never known any of that. Have you heard, you're speaking of snow geese sitting on it? I've just been seeing a little bit on Instagram, and I don't know if it's in the west part of it, but I know it is over here in Iowa, and kind of that flyway that they've had an avian bird type flu going through snow geese. Have you heard anything of that out where you're at?
I actually just saw that. I wasn't sure if it was related to exactly what you're talking about, because there's a lot of things. Snow geese typically do have this avian cholera in them, which is a wintertime disease, and they tend to pass that to other birds. I've been involved in tons of times with that and another summertime disease called botulism, where you have to pile up these dead birds and burn them and pick them up out of the marsh, and it's pretty gross, maggots and the whole deal. But it could be cholera. I just saw there was something, just saw real briefly, that in North Dakota they were trying to cut down the poultry trade and maybe even cut off a bunch of hunt tests and field trials. And no birds, period. And that's a big stressor for me and for everyone who runs dogs. Is, that happened in California a couple of years ago with this Newcastle disease, and they shut down. You had to get rid of all your pigeons and chuckers and everything.
Oh wow, did not know that. Yeah, what I've seen is basically the bird is like, it can't control its head at all. It's just kind of like just all over the place, and people are finding them. A lot of guys will leave their snow decoy spreads out for however long, and they're walking out there in the mornings and just finding dead snow geese laying in there. And So I didn't know if you knew anything
Yeah,
about that or not, or
a couple of things. Generally, cholera is kind of considered a really quick disease. So they die pretty fast. Like you could be walking along and kick up a bunch of coots and one literally just rolls over and dies.
oh,
Whereas this other one, botulism in the summertime, is a slower disease and is known for having some of that where this limber neck and the duck is out completely out of control. There's another one, duck virus enteritis, that it could be. I'm not sure. I haven't heard specifically about what's going on in the Midwest.
yeah.
Honestly, I have junk internet and cell service, so I just try to stay to my own world.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that either. Sometimes the less internet, the better. Uh, so what's been one of your favorite projects? Obviously, this project that you've been talking about is super cool to me. But what's been one of your favorite projects since you've been a bird biologist that you've been able to do?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about a couple of things, but I think it's really cool getting your hands on different birds. I've banded a ton of different waterfowl species and sage grouse, sandhill cranes. I used to be able to incorporate my love of dogs and my bird biology, where one of the refuges I worked at, I was basically a crane biologist, and we were doing a project where we were keeping track of the young cranes, which are called colts, and they're actually really smart and really hard to catch after they're just a few days old. And I was able to use my wire hairs to go out and find them and point them, and then we would capture them and band them. And that was really cool, like being able to incorporate that. I've got to go out and look for different grouse, sage grouse leks and sharp-tail nests and things using dogs. And so combining my two loves and getting paid to do such is
Yeah, that's awesome.
situation. So I'll also say I've got to go to just some of the coolest places I've been to. I believe I've been to all the refuges in the West except for a couple in Alaska. And so that's been a good experience, getting to just see cool places. And honestly, the places that I've been in Alaska is like just its own world.
Yeah.
And places that I've been to are really remote, Cold Bay and the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, and up in Barrow, up at the very top of Alaska, and just different worlds to get to take a peek in. And I never fit in because of the dog situation to really live in Alaska for forever. Really difficult to be off the grid system and be a dog breeder.
Yeah, for sure. Which leads us into our next topic. So you have been in the dog breeding and kennel industry since, you said, 1996, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah. Growing up, my dad was always a dog guy. He field trialed labs and had setters, and he really got into waterfowl hunting when he was in his 30s and 40s. And we managed this place called Ogden Bay Waterfowl Management Area, which is, at the time anyways, it had a pretty decent population of pheasants, quail, and snipe, and some great waterfowl hunting, swans, ducks, geese. And so we were just looking for a dog that did everything. And we had Chesapeakes and Labs, which were fantastic dogs growing up. And I remember about 1990, we saw our first Wirehair that we'd ever seen hunting. And we were actually at a pheasant preserve. And it was this small little female that was just incredible. I think my dad had won a pheasant hunt, and it said guided, and then we get there and the guy's like, well, you didn't bring a dog, and we didn't know, so we didn't bring our dogs because we didn't think we were supposed to. And so this guy took us out with this Wirehair, and we were both transfixed on that breed and getting into it. And dad got our first Wirehair just a few years later, in 1992, and then things went crazy from there. We have a lot of dogs now, tons of cone dogs all across the nation, and I really love the breed, and I love all dogs. I mean, I'm a NAVHDA judge. I love watching all the different versatile dogs do what they're supposed to do. I've loved watching hound dogs and sheep dogs, do what they're supposed to do. But these dogs just have a special place in my heart, and have just been a really fun experience being part of kind of a niche breed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nick, nice of you to join us tonight.
Sorry guys. I had swim lessons and stuff. My daughter's is sorry to be late.
No worries.
Dom, how's it going?
It's going really great. We've been chatting it up about bird biology and bird dogs. Basically, what I do all day, every day, is try to talk about birds or bird dogs. So pretty normal day.
Seems like we have a group that does the same thing, pretty much, that we talk to.
Yeah.
So continue. Sorry, I missed the first part of that. What dog do you have, Dom? Sorry.
I right now I run German. Last year got my first non-Wirehair since I was in my teens. I had a Chesapeake, but we did get a Cocker Spaniel to use as part of our hunting guiding regime. You know, it's very popular right now to do the flusher pointer thing, and so I have enjoyed that. It didn't quite make the team. I'd like to start breeding Cockers, and that one was fantastic little dog, but didn't quite make the team. And we just got another one, so we've got another Cocker. And if I had space, I would always have more dogs. But I try to buy one wire, another breeder, and keep 2 to 3 every year. So it's a process.
Holy cow!
How many dogs are you up to?
You know, I don't even know how to answer that question anymore. I co-own a bunch of dogs, and right now I have some dogs that are off on the field trial circuit, and I have some dogs that are off getting bred. And I also, because I live on a big remote ranch in the middle of nowhere in kind of checker country, I have to ship a lot of my dogs to families somewhere to get kind of that family urban life. If they work out for me, I want them to be like a smooth transition and I just want dogs that can handle all kinds of things. And that's one thing that I can offer every kind of bird and running and every kind of dog training gizmo ever invented, but I can't offer sort of family life and urban life.
Where did you get your Cocker from? Just curious.
I got it from Andrea Mahorny, and she's up in Nez Perce, Idaho, and she has some really nice stuff.
Have you ever heard of Raglan Gun Dogs of Illinois?
Of course, and I follow. I want to get more into Cockers, and I want to learn more about it. But I follow all of the Cocker breeding stuff.
Okay.
And I'm the kind of guy that likes to research stuff a lot. So.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense being a bird biologist and you had to get your master's and PhD and stuff. So that kind of fits right in with you. So what got you into NAVHDA testing and being a judge then?
Yeah, sure. The NAVHDA thing is intriguing to me. I tested my first dog in the early 1990s. When I was 13, I started working for a guy who's actually still, amazingly enough, training dogs at Miller Kennels in Plain City, Utah, a guy named Roger Miller. And I just started the way I think most good dog trainers start, by picking up poop for years. And so I started that way, and we started doing some NAVHDA tests. My dad was one of the founding members of the Utah NAVHDA chapter, which is the Wasatch chapter of NAVHDA, which is a really good chapter. They tend to have really good trainers, really good training, and really high scores. When I go to judge their utility scores are top notch. There's some people who take it pretty seriously. And I've always wanted to be a judge. As I was saying earlier, I've lived all over the place and traveled, and honestly, becoming a NAVHDA judge is very expensive and time consuming and much more difficult out west than in the Midwest or in the East. I mean, chapters can be really far apart and can be really hard. You've got to judge a lot of dogs and stuff. And so when I got a couple of raises and moved up in the job world and was able to have enough time off to be able to feel comfortable doing it, I wanted to do it decades ago, but I started doing it, and the apprentice program is tough. Like they actually, I don't know if you guys are familiar with NAVHDA all that much, but they judge the dog on a scoring system, but they also judge these apprentice judges on a scoring system. And at the end of the day, at every NAVHDA event you've been to or that you go to, they read the scores of the dog. Well, they also read in private, thankfully, they go over your scores for the day of like how you did, how you worked with the dog, how you read the people, how you knew the rules. And they basically quiz you from starting about 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 3 days straight. And it was like going back in grad school and having a bunch of PhDs asking me questions all the time. It was some long weekends, but I really like it because I do think that their judges really know their stuff and they really care. But I did it as a way to extend sort of how I meet people that are interested in the same things as me. And I love the opportunity, especially as a judge, where you can kind of you can help people, especially in the natural ability tests. And lots of times people within 3 states of me, they like my style, and then they ask if they can come and train at our place, and we make lifelong friends and go on hunting trips and talk about birds and bird dogs. And mostly I remember the dogs. If I ever judged you and you start telling me who you are, I usually stop you and say, well, tell me more about the dog. I'll probably remember that before I remember you.
What how often do you judge? How frequently?
Yeah, so I've been trying to keep it at 3 to 4 weekends a year total. I mean, I have a day job and a busy dog breeding business, as well as some other side shows. And so this is going to be my worst, dumbest year ever, because I think I'm doing 5 this year, but I just keep getting, there's a lot of judges who are aging out and retiring, and there's NAVHDA as an organization has been growing exponentially over the last few years. And so
we've heard a lot about it recently, if I feel like.
Yeah, a lot of organizations, like I really want to get into more horseback field trial stuff, but that's like you have to be in it to get into that. Like financially, it takes a lot to go to a NAVHDA test and go basically get like free sort of training advice and free training days and access to birds and other people that hunt and do outdoorsy things in your area. It can't be beat. But since there's so few judges right now, and especially out west, they're desperate for judging, and I got invited to just cool places, and I'm actually headed back here in a couple weeks. This is bragging in a way, but I'm pretty excited because I was able to scam. I'm headed back to Maryland to judge for NAVHDA, but I was supposed to get my 50th state, visiting my 50th state a couple years ago, but this silly little thing called COVID came up, and it's made traveling difficult. And
yes,
so
it has.
I scammed my way into getting invited to judge in Maryland, and my last state is Rhode Island, and I'm going to go. My significant other and I are going to get to go to Rhode Island, which is my 50th state, which I grew up in Utah, kind of a repressed world, and I made a goal when I was 20 and moved to California that I was going to drink a beer in all 50 states before I was 40, and I dang near made it. So, but I'm about ready to drink my beer in Rhode Island here in 2 weeks, and I'm really excited.
That's
Nice.
impressive.
It's a good goal to have.
Yeah.
Put that on my books
by a couple of years, but I'm certainly tried my best. But this year I'm also going to Wyoming, which is a state that super intrigues me. I want to live in Wyoming someday. And then I'll be judging also in Alaska, Dakota, and Arizona. So getting around.
I'd like to we're going to Wyoming this year ourselves. Maybe Tyler said this earlier.
No, he didn't. For a big game hunt.
Sage grouse.
That's the state that has the most sage grouse for sure.
Yeah. So we were going there. We got invited by some buddies we kind of met through podcasting and whatnot. So we're heading out there September 16th. We leave and going out and gonna give it a try, I suppose. I worked for this program called the SGI Sage Grouse Initiative for a while when I was in Washington, and they've always intrigued me. I mean, I remember the exact moment that I shot my first one in 1992, and about that same week in September, it was pouring down rain. I was wearing a rubber rain jacket because that's what we had in those days, and I was sweating so much. I still had glasses then. I was sweating so much, and I was walking along, and the dog was on point, and we'd seen a couple of sharp tails, but I knew there was
there was going to be sage grouse, and this big old boomer gets up off our dog's point, and I shot, literally, you could not see out my glasses. It was just straight shooting a giant blob. And when that thing went down, I was so excited. I actually set my gun down and ran out there to grab it. They've been a bird that has always intrigued me. A lot of times when you go sage grouse hunting, most likely where you go, it's the only bird that's out there. Like there's not like a lot of combo hunting with sage grouse, just live in this unique environment.
Because there's what is it? Blue grouse up in the mountains a little higher if you go there.
Yeah, there's a few places. One in Idaho that Dad and I did it. Now mostly the seasons don't overlap perfectly, but there was a place in southern Idaho where at one point you could, in the same walk, shoot a rough grouse, a blue grouse, or it would be technically a dusky grouse. A sharp grouse, a sharp-tailed grouse, and a sage grouse, all in the same area, and pretty cool for that. I was telling Tyler earlier, that's like one of my favorite things, is seeking out these locations that you could go after multi-species in a day. I did a very special hunt that I'd planned for years to try to get 4 grouse species in one day. We never did pull it off. It's hard to do, but we did it within the hunt, just not within the day.
Let me ask you this, Dom. What boots are you wearing along these treks here? Because that's one thing that we're always trying to figure out what to buy for our next boot.
Gosh, I'm bad at this. I will tell you, I did spend over $1,000 on boots this year because I haven't bought boots in 5 years.
Hopefully that's more than one pair.
Yeah, it's actually 4 that I ended up buying, including new rubbers and new everything. Financially, I'm the kind of person that was just raised that way, to use shoe goo and squeeze things out, squeeze the life. But I use some boots. I have some Danner pronghorns that are like 13 years old that everyone's like, oh, those don't last me a season. And I'm like, I hunt harder than anyone I know, and they last me, but I do try to take care of my stuff. But I really like these. I believe it's these Whites Hawaii is kind of a funny. Whites is like known as like a forestry brand. But they do make these hunting boots now, and I love those. I have an issue with my feet in that my right foot is much wider than my left foot is a normal size.
It's like my wife. She has 1 foot longer than the other.
Oh, it's such a struggle.
Or bigger than the other, whatever you want to say. One foot's a size 8, and the other one's size 5 or something like that.
Yeah. I'm two boots, and I absolutely so the right boot always tears out when the left boot has nothing wrong with it still. So,
man, I bet these are super good. I think I'm on the White's boots, handmade since 1853 in Spokane, Washington.
Yeah,
I bet those are some super good boots.
Yeah, so I've been happy with that. A lot of the fire guys really believe in White's boots, and they spend a lot of time trekking. But I've actually learned, I used to wear my nice boots to testing and trialing and for judging, because in a judging weekend, you'll often walk miles in 3 days if you're doing a bunch of natural ability tests. And now I just wear like, because it's really not that hardcore. You're always in like a nice field, and you're never going in. So I realized I just like nice shoes now.
Yeah, for sure. Do you speaking of NAVHDA, do you have one of the tests that you enjoy judging the most?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I've judged the invitational. I'm not actually qualified to judge that, but I've judged. There's three places I have judged: the natural ability, the utility preparatory test, ability test. And the utility is a really finished dog, and it does everything that I think any legitimate bird hunter would want to do. All the duck hunting stuff, all the bird hunting stuff. The only thing it's not required to do is backing. There's just not backing in that particular test. But I like watching that, and I'll tell you, I don't really care about the score. What I like watching is when a dog hasn't had too much pressure. A dog that gets a really high score, but has had so much pressure on it, its tail's kind of between its legs, and it just doesn't have a lot of style, and it's doing it because it has to, versus these dogs, especially a lot of times it's, I don't know if this is biased, but a lot of times it's women that are running these dogs, that the dog just is so happy and so, obviously hasn't been over pressured, and they're just so fun to watch them do their job. Like they're just so happy bringing a bird in. And that's what I love seeing. I love seeing dogs that are happy doing what they're supposed to do, just crushing through the brush and not doing it because they've been trained by a professional trainer to do it.
What does it require for a judge to be on you said invitational that you're not?
Yeah, I've never actually ran a dog in the invitational. I'm qualified to this year. I decided not to, even though it's in New Mexico, because this other thing that I'm really into is the German Wirehair pointer field trial stuff, and the nationals is right at the same time. But so you would have to run a dog and pass a dog in it, and you'd have to be a senior judge, which I'm probably only a year or two away from being eligible as a senior judge. And I certainly will run in the invitational someday, but it's in September. And that, to me, to like us Westerners, is bird season. I mean, I start where I live. I start September 1 in Montana, and I end somewhere in Northern California or Southern Oregon on March 10th, when our spec and snow goose season ends. So it's a long go, and we don't.
How many days do you think you actually get out on that time? Are you hunting almost every day?
I'm afraid that some of my supervisors may be listening to this, so I'm afraid to give you an actual answer. Let's just say, this last year, the last couple of years, I've been able to spend a month or more in Arizona, and because of COVID and other things, I'm able to telework, and then I'm down there hunting 3 species of quail, 3 or 4 days a week at least. And where I was living down there, I can be on a quail covey in 10 minutes from the house. So you could do a couple conference calls, take a 2-hour lunch break, go hunting, come back and work for 5 or 6 hours on a grant or something, and get a full day's work in and still sneak in a hunt. And that's something that's been important to me my whole life. All the places that I've lived have had hunting 15 minutes from my house. That's like the maximum I'll do.
Yeah, I like the way you think.
That's great.
I telework now, working from home, and that has definitely been one of the benefits of that, is being able to squeeze in an afternoon hunt or something. Just get up a little earlier, log in a little earlier, and leave a little earlier. That's been super nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to tell you, like, this thing that I've just been getting into since 2019 is like these horseback field trials. And I'll tell you, I'm not a horse guy. Like, I worked on kind of a dude ranch shoveling horse poop and knew a little bit about horses when I was young. And then I'm like, now people who ride horses have broken hips and broken necks, and it's not my thing. But I've gotten into this, and I really have the bug now. I want to get a horse and I want to do it. And I used to always think how dumb, like who would want a dog that only runs off horseback? But it's not really like that. These dogs are smart, and they figure out how to run big and how to run, if you're forest grouse hunting, they're there within 70, 80 yards of you, and they're 500 yards out when you're on the horseback. But it's been really fun. I'm super getting into it. I'm headed to a horseback trial this weekend. And the people who do that, like, it's next level. These aren't just people who like, oh, I got a dog and I do this. They're people that are kind of like my people, they all have 10 or 12 dogs. They all have every kind of dog training gizmo. They all hunt their butts off,
What are most people going after for horseback when they're hunting birds off horseback?
I think there's less and less options to truly hunt off horseback because of fences make it difficult. But certainly some of the things that you could do off horseback all over in Montana. Montana is not the land of fence, and much of Canada. You can ride and hunt pheasants, you could hunt sharptails, huns, you could hunt sage grouse. All those things could easily be hunted off horseback, as well as a lot of checker hunting in not too rough of country. It's possible to go in and hunt off horseback, but I like the view, because a lot of times I'm doing what's gun dog stakes. So they're not huge running dogs anyways. There's this thing called all age, which is like English pointers and setters really excel at, that are like these big, really big running dogs. But the gun dog stuff is, the dog can be within a few hundred yards or 400 yards maybe, but you can see everything that's going on. And it's just a really great view. And when you go to a NAVHDA test, like you're running your dog and maybe your wife or your kid or your, husband comes walking with you, but not the whole gallery can't see a lot of what's going on. The judges are the only ones who get this great show. In the field trial world, everybody rides every brace if you want to, so you get to see everything. So it's really more of a spectator sport in that way.
I've
That's crazy.
Never taken, or like haven't looked into it much. And do they shoot off the back of the horse, or do they get off the horse and then shoot at the bird?
They do get off the horse. I'm sure people have shot off the top of a horse, but actually in most of the field trials, and this is going to sound weird to you guys, but they don't actually kill the birds. You get off the horse and you shoot a cap gun. They really care about the beauty of the search and the find and the point and how the point looks and how much style the dog has. They do this kind of strange to someone new called a callback. So if you're in the ribbons and you're gonna win first, second, third, fourth place, then they would plant a bird and you would walk up to it, your dog would point it, and a gunner would shoot the bird. They rarely are able to shoot birds on course anymore, because it takes a lot of extra people with horses, and you gotta have 2 more guys with guns and all this stuff. And so it's hard to pull off, as that sport has kind of gotten less and less popular because of the finances behind it. So a lot of it is actually more about not about the killing. Like NASTRA, you get to shoot your own birds and it's really fun. It's like a little game you can play, but this is more just purely about the dogs and watching the dogs more so.
Well, I accidentally muted Nick for some reason.
No, you probably heard my daughters in the background. That's crazy. I love that they're just taking the beauty of the dog and how it's hunting and just watching it, and they don't even care about the bird, because honestly, that's why we hunt. I don't necessarily, if I didn't have a dog, I probably wouldn't hunt, to be honest with you. I love going out with them and I love being with them, and it's more about seeing them succeed and watching them do what they love, which makes me love it because they love it. And then if you get a bird, you get a bird. If you don't, you don't.
Absolutely. It was one of my co-owners, and she was basically telling me that she's like, if I didn't have my dog for the weekend, I just wouldn't go. And I don't know, I still have the hunting bug in me enough that I'd probably figure it out. And I have to go a lot with other people's dogs, dogs that we've bred or friends that I invite, or when you're guiding people and they want to use their dogs. And I just like watching dogs. So it doesn't really bother me whether it's my dog or somebody else's dog, but it's sure fun when your dog's doing well and doing what it was bred to do and trained to do and those kind of things. It's always a very good feeling.
Yeah, for sure. What's been one of your best memories in the gun dog world that you can think of, whether hunting, whether that's training, whether it's judging? What's been one of your favorite memories?
Yeah, I think, there's a bunch of situations, but it's always the same thing. It's like when all the pieces of a puzzle come together. You've got somebody that, is a new hunter, and they've got their new dog, and all these things fall together. And sometimes I feel like I'm kind of a puzzle master, pulling the strings, making sure that the person is standing in the right spot, making sure the dog knows what to do, using my dogs to maybe even find a covey and then pulling them back and letting them bring their dog in and getting that point, or getting that, calling to that duck, and then having them make that shot, and just seeing that the look in their eyes when things all come together, and especially when all the pieces fall together. It's really, really fun.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah. And I do a bunch. I'm super stoked. I've got this situation I keep adding levels of craziness to my life. But last year, I did a day where we did 10 dogs all at once, all at a NAVHDA test, all wire hairs, all dogs that we bred. And all the owners from across the country came together. We basically had a big party while we did it. And it was so much fun. I'm doing it again this year, but this year I'm doing it with all youth handlers. So all kids 13 years and younger, which as far as I know, out west, that's never been done at a NAVHDA event before. So I'm really
That is
excited
awesome. That's
Oregon
incredible.
helping us make that happen. And I think the day before, we're going to all meet up. We're all going to camp at the site. We're going to, make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But I'm going to do like a mini dog training seminar. We're probably going to take the kids on, show them horseback, like what it's like running dogs off horseback, show them all the different scenarios of what's going to happen the next day. So they're not nervous about it, as nervous. Obviously, they're still going to be nervous. And I'm super fired up for that. That's happening in June. I was never able to have my own children. And so working with kids that get to go to someone else's house at the end of the day, I have no problem. I really like working with kids and new hunters and women hunters that I've been working on kind of that world for several years now and really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, there's no better way to bring them into it than having a good mentor. And you got to keep growing those pooper scoopers. They got to start at the bottom and work their way up, right?
Yeah, I got a gal right now that she's 13. Her name is Tressa. She's my apprentice. She's been working for me for 2 summers, and she's a local here. It's real remote. She goes to a 1-room schoolhouse. Only goes to school with her 3 sisters. So you can imagine that's a different world, but she's been really good. Last weekend, I was lucky enough to be able to take her to a Rick Smith dog training seminar. And, Delmar Smith and the Smith family is kind of these godfathers of a certain training method anyways. And they allow you to take kids for free. And so I took her, and it was so cool watching her like figure it out. And then, Rick Smith walking up to her, he's in his mid 70s, and just saying, wow, you're really good with this dog. And, just seeing her face light up and see her realize that, I mean, right now I'd like to take on more apprentices, because with COVID and you don't know what the best job choice is, but I guarantee you, if you can teach a dog obedience and do dog training, you can do that in any city, anywhere, and make money. It is a really good skill to have. So I can sell it to these kids that it's a good opportunity to, if something happens, you lose your job tomorrow, you can take on dogs and start helping do, whether it's basic obedience or advanced hunting dog training. So.
Yep. Well, that's really good.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
So has she been your only apprentice so far?
Yeah, I've never been crazy enough to take on as many dogs as I did last year, and I'm trying to take on a few less. But I own so many, and co-own so many, and have so many litters going that it's like it's more than I can handle. What the real value is I really love doing these weekend training sessions that are like a one-on-one. Like you got your first, like, so let's say German short hair, and you went to a training day with like 20 other people, and you learned a little bit, but you want to do more. And so I live so remote, people come and stay at the house. We basically Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, we do these intensive dog training sessions where not only do we work your dog, but you work my dogs too. And so you get a feel for like a dog that just started at this, a dog that's at your dog's level, an advanced dog, a dog that's been an old pro at this, and you can really see it. I think it's really motivating. And the problem that I have with that is it's really hard to talk to people and plant birds and manage a dog. And you see someone like Rick Smith, he can do it. He can actually, I swear to you, I watched him, he can read a dog that's behind him just by reading the faces of what the people in the audience he's looking at. He'd be like, the dog moved a step, didn't it? It was really impressive to see that. But so what Tressa is able to help me do is she can get the next dog ready. She can go plant birds. She can run out there and fix something if I forgot to do something, and drive the other truck or drive the trailer. And as a 13-year-old, it's probably pretty cool to be able to drive an $80,000 truck and trailer around. So she has a good time, and it really helps me spend that one-on-one time with either a puppy buyer of ours or, a client that's in for dog training. And I'm not a professional dog trainer. I'm not an amateur by legal status as far as running dogs, but I do it for fun. I mean, it's fun working with people. I finally realized last couple of years I have to make a couple of dollars to pay for my other addiction. But
Yeah, for sure. Do you what's for someone that's never ran in NAVHDA, or maybe just getting into the versatile dog world, what's one of the biggest tips you would give them if they're looking to get into NAVHDA and running tests or trials?
sure. I think the first tip is probably too late for most people, but it is pick the right breeder. Pick someone that is breeding the dog that does the things that you want it to do, and that is someone that you can communicate with. It's a lot like, sort of like getting a realtor. I mean, it's someone that can influence your life super positively, or just be a pain in the butt. And so having a good breeder that does the same sort of hunt tests and field trials as you do, I think can be really nice. And someone that's really invested in their breed and in their breedings, like we are. I mean, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of great breeders out there, but there's also a lot of not so great breeders. And I think everyone learns pretty much the hard way. Their first dog, they get it from, they get the puppy fever. They find out, Joe down the street has a litter of puppies, and they get one. And usually the second dog goes a lot better. But the advice that I would give is do your homework on like what the test is, like what it's asking. There's this Ames guide that really describes the test. I'm always shocked how people get there and they literally have no idea what it is that they're there to do. And there is a free book that tells you that. There's some great video resources. Your breeder should be able to help you with that. I give all of my puppy buyers a 16-page document, and that document is not about dog training. It's just about what I think is important about the test and what your day is going to be like. And especially some of the stuff that's really confusing and hard is just like how to get involved in a chapter, how to sign up for a test, how to get the dog registered, how to get become a chapter member, all these things that some chapters are way better technologically with, and others not so much. But get involved in the training days. And even if it's not your thing, group training, you can often meet someone and make a connection to birds. You can make a connection to hunting. You can often make a connection to someone who you and that other person can just go and train if the group training thing is not your thing. But the one thing that I'd like to say to everybody is just go try it. I don't care whether it's NAVHDA or AKC or Versatile Honey Dog Federation or Bird Dog Challenge or NASTRA. Go check it out and go try it. And if you don't like it, there's another game that you will. I mean, there's just so many games out there.
Oh, that's great advice. So again, we appreciate you coming on. You've given out tons of information. Love to learn about the biology part of it. Love to learn about your kennel, your goals, and excited to hopefully see you on a horseback someday riding around.
I'll be
I apologize for being late.
No worries.
But no, this was great. Definitely appreciate you coming on and taking an hour out of your night to talk dogs and biology and all that good stuff. So again, we appreciate it. So
thanks for. I'll be thinking about you guys mid-September chasing sage grouse.
Yeah, for sure. We'll let you know how we do.
Awesome.
So all right.
Thanks, Dom. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.